Hey, everybody, and welcome to this presentation on ego and the self. Now, despite its pronounced impact on our lives, most of us have no awareness of the ego and how it drives our behavior. The ego, the great protector of the inner child, is the I in your identity. Anything that follows the word I is an extension of the ego. I'm smart. I'm a good writer. I work hard. I'm gaining weight. The ego is our sense of self, our personal identity, and our self-worth. The ego is a master storyteller, creating and maintaining narratives about who we believe we are. The ego itself is not good or bad. It just is. So let's talk about, for the purposes of our program, a little bit more. What is the ego? The ego is formed in childhood through the beliefs and ideas imparted on us by our parent figures, friends, immediate community, and greater environment that we ourselves carry forward. It's what we call our personality or self-identity, and it lives in our subconscious. Its job is to protect our identity, which is why it can be so defensive and fear-based. We've been talking about how anxiety can make us angry, or getting frustrated about little things doesn't feel like who we truly are. That's the ego at work. The ego works to keep us living in a predictable environment, something we can control. It keeps us aligned with familiar narratives because that feels a lot safer than the uncertainty of not knowing. So the ego is attached to its ideas, opinions, and beliefs, and it just runs as this endless stream of thoughts, keeping us locked into this identity. And while the ego's core objective is to protect us at all times and at whatever cost, it actually can be really rigid and bring out these defense mechanisms in us. And there are times when the ego is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So our ego helps us in our career, and it helps us gain ambition in order to get promotions and succeed and do more. But at the same time, we also have to manage it like crazy, because if we don't, it's going to take over and create all this chaos in our life. So we're going to go over 3 topics today: ego, activations, and projection. And then we're going to pivot to self, truth, and consciousness. And then we're going to end on the 4 agreements. So let's talk about activations and projection. And these are probably 2 terms that you've heard before. We mentioned the ego is hyper vigilant. It's always acting as a bodyguard. It's rigid, even hostile. And it refuses to compromise or even offer compassion. So that's where we have to come in and level it out, right? So kind of our common sense, our better judgment has to step in and put the ego in the corner once in a while. And part of the reason why is because the ego makes everything personal, not only with how people talk to us and how we hear it, but how we talk to ourselves too. So it's going to ignite our insecurity and low self-esteem. It's going to push us to defend things that really don't need to be defended, or judge or condemn others in different situations. It's going to cause us to compare and really just crush our well-being and inner peace. So the ego is in this near constant defensive stance, and it's ready to spring into action if experiences bring up any opposition at all. And so here are a few ways that that can happen. First, it'll bring on a strong emotional reaction. There are, some books that call this all hands on deck. When your ego is trying to protect you from a wound that you have, it'll create this emotional reaction to defend you. And so if, for example, you feel like you do all the work in your house, all the housework, all of it's on you, and then you notice a sink full of dishes, you might get crazy mad and start ranting at people because your ego is pissed that you're the one that has to do it all. Instead of taking that beat and asking for some help, you turn to this emotional side first. So that's a great example of an ego activation. Another piece is false confidence. So some might even call this like leaning into narcissism a little bit. But this is more often than not a bravado that emerges from feelings of insecurity due to a lack of connection with your authentic self. And so, again, this is probably our friend a little bit in the career world, but for the most part, it's not a super healthy way to live day to day. And important to keep that false confidence under control as well. The ego will also cause you to lack nuance in thinking. Everything is black and white, right or wrong. There's no gray area. What somebody said was offensive, or the candidate that believes in XYZ is completely crazy, right? There's no real nuance in the thinking, and that is totally driven by ego, and it's going to make you crazy. And so we just need to calm all of that down. We need to take the ego, give it its time out, and kind of come back to our center. Two more things that it will do is it'll get you into these comparing or competing loops and kind of always feeling threatened. Not just threatened like by people in your life or something they say, but how you compare yourself to them. And what happens is then that begins all that mental chatter when you convince yourself that you're not okay. So let's talk about projection. We talked about how ego works overtime to defend its perception of who we are, right? All these labels that we give ourselves. And to this, it denies or represses emotions that we feel are bad or wrong in order for us to kind of look at ourselves in that good or desirable light, because we need and want to receive as much love as possible. But these bad or wrong parts of us are still a part of us, and they deserve love too. And so this is what we call that shadow self. And we can go into more examples of this as well in our discussions. But adults are guilty kind of enabling this repression of these shadow parts by, for example, telling kids that some things shouldn't be done or should be hidden, like you shouldn't cry if you're feeling upset. And we learn to maintain our connections this way so that we appear acceptable and more likable to the world. So this is a survival mechanism. And, we do this because we want people to care about us, but we don't want to ruffle any feathers. And so we try to hide these flawed parts of ourselves and try to be perfect. And this is why we can't understand when there's really nothing wrong in our life and we're still sad. And we're so hard on ourselves about that. That's your freaking ego. And emotions are a natural part of life. There's going to be happy days and there's going to be sad days. Those are emotions. We cannot control when and how we feel these things. But we can control and put into perspective how much we let our ego in the conversation. There's a book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. He is a Stoic and he taps into a lot of philosophical teachings in his writing. Now, we mentioned that the ego can also have good attributes as well. And so take the name of the book with a grain of salt. But what he says is wherever you are, whatever you're doing, your worst enemy already lives inside you, your ego. It's the unhealthy belief in our own importance. And when we remove ego, we're left with what is real. So an unhealthy belief of our own importance. Now, this doesn't mean you're not important. This doesn't mean that you don't have a big job and that being a mom is hard work and that you really are a good writer. That's not the unhealthy belief, okay? The unhealthy belief is the mind chatter, the pressure that you're putting on yourself to be perfect, to please everyone, to make everyone love you, and to go 24/7, nonstop, 365 days a year to do all the things ever that you think you should be doing. That is an unhealthy belief in our own importance. So now that we know a little bit more about the ego and how it kind of gets in our way, let's talk about self-truth and consciousness. Now, before we get too deep, because this is going to go a little deeper, the key is to simply witness what's going on from the outside. So you in there are not the thoughts of your brain. You're not the emotions that are happening. You're not the body. You are the thing, the soul, the spirit inside watching all of this happen. You are the soul having a human experience. Your body is a biological function, right? And so the way your brain works, the way all of it works is by design. But it's not you. That's not you thinking those thoughts, doing all those things. And so when we think about that, and we can step back and look at what this person is doing today. Oh, look at her get all upset about those dishes. You actually, when you step outside of it, looking in, you realize that you're letting your mind and your emotions control your happiness. And that is no bueno. So what I like to do is I named my ego, and I encourage you to do the same. Her name is Big Dolores, and she gets in my way sometimes. And when she is making me second guess something I said in a work meeting, if she's nagging me about, oh, you got to make sure you get the kids' dentist appointment on the schedule, or, oh, you got to make sure this, she needs to quiet down once in a while. And I need to recognize that Big Dolores is getting on my nerves and she's under my skin. So think about that, okay? Next time your mind is starting to chatter, next time you're feeling those emotions and that panic that you did something wrong, remember that's your ego. That is not you. You are not that list of labels that you created and grew up with as a child. You are so much more than that. And look deep within yourself to find who that is. So giving your ego a space to settle is another trick. When you're realizing you're getting all worked up about something, kind of imagine yourself walking your ego into a nice little room full of pillows and blankets. Be like, take a nap. I got this. And then you can go back out into the world and handle things more appropriately. Listen to your I am statements and listen to them more objectively. So we're not very nice to ourselves, and we need to remember to talk to ourselves more like we would talk to a friend. It's okay to burn dinner. It is okay to gain 3 pounds. It's mostly water weight anyway. It's okay. These I am statements are powerful, and we better make sure that the I am statements we're feeding ourselves are from a healthy place with our best intention and our highest and greatest good in mind. Also, recognize reactions versus responses. So getting angry and frustrated, these are reactions. Think about how you want to respond instead. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the dishes again. You can load the dishwasher yourself. You could walk away and do them later. You could ask somebody else to do them. You could do them the next day. There's 100 things you could do instead of react. So how will you respond? And that's really how we ask ego to take a seat and how we can reflect a little bit better, more aligned to our core values and really who we want to be. Right now, we're wasting all sorts of energy on getting upset about things that are not worth getting upset about. Now, the concept of self-truth is who that is inside you. Whether you look at yourself as a soul living a human experience, or you do look at yourself as your name and the things that helped you become who you are today. Look objectively at this person and their behaviors and reactions. And remember to be honest about what you're seeing. It's okay to accept the tough stuff. It's okay to admit when you have a few flaws, and you can work on those. Or not. You could also just honor them as part of who you are. Remember that projections are internal emotions that we externalize onto others. And so this is going to take a little bit of practice, but we'll do a worksheet or there'll be a whiteboard. When we're upset about something or at someone, it's important for us to try and trace back what it is about that situation that is actually upsetting us. And so if we kind of go back to the dishes example, someone leaving dirty dishes in the sink and kind of leaving them for you to do makes you feel that you're not being considered, that the expectation is that it's your job to do that. And that sucks, right? And so we have to think about our reaction as projecting those feelings back when what we need to be doing is responding. We talked about the ego. Mine's name is Big Dolores. But there's also another, I would say, layer of this ego that is especially hard on you. And that's going to be your inner critic. My coach calls it the inner jerk. So rather than lifting us up, our inner critic is the voice of judgment and failure and negativity and second guessing. It's the part of you that activates the ego to go crazy, right? Go into overdrive. It's what's activating you to feel all this anxiety and do all these things to try and self-soothe, because you are recognizing that your smoke detectors are going off and you need to find some way to kind of like integrate some self-care. But that's already too far. If we start here, if we start with quieting the inner critic, if we start by recognizing and witnessing our ego and focusing how we can respond instead of react, you won't even get to that point. You'll be able to kind of stop that train before it goes off the tracks. So active mind chatter is a big thing for me. It happens in the middle of the night. It happens while I'm in meetings. It happens every time I'm not actively working on something. And so how I'm starting to try and help myself here is by creating those active ingredients to give my mind a way to be quieted. Sometimes that's just playing solitaire with a deck of cards or coloring a coloring book. It's so simple. Quieting the mind at first is going to take practice, but the more we do it, the easier it will get. I'm going to talk a little bit about the RAS. Now, you may have heard of something called lucky girl syndrome. Honestly, I'm not super sure how I feel about it, but I will say there is some science around the idea of the power of the mind and affirmations and visualization. And really, at the end of the day, that's what lucky girl syndrome is, right? So the RAS is a part of your brain that unconsciously filters out unnecessary information throughout the day. So only the important stuff gets through. And the idea of lucky girl syndrome is every day when you wake up, you're programming your RAS with what to look for in the day. So if you wake up, oh, I'm so tired, then all day long, it's going to show you all these different ways you're tired, you're exhausted, there's too much going on, oh my gosh. But if you kind of wake up and think about maybe 3 things you really want to accomplish that day, the RAS is going to feed you information to help you get to that point. It's going to give you the positive stuff. Now, it's kind of already scheduled or like programmed to pick out the things that feed that ego or that inner critic chatter. So if you're already feeling a few pounds overweight and I'm so unhealthy and oh, I'm so stressed, if you're feeling that way, it's going to keep giving it to you, shoveling it right back. So what we need to do is flip that. We need to flip it with, I'm lucky to have this job. It does not define my whole life. I work these hours and then I go for a nice walk. So again, we're going back to brain science here. It's just tapping into the tricks of helping your brain sort of provide you with opportunities to be successful during the day instead of giving you all these crazy challenges that have brought us to this point in the first place. So think about your RAS a little bit and think about ways that you can start to integrate more, I would say, positive triggers that it can help you with through the day. Now I have to read another poem from one of my new favorite poets. Her name is Morgan Harper Nichols. Perhaps this is the season to step fully into the beautiful reality of what it means to be free, brave, and adventurous, and ready for the journey of learning and growing, of living and knowing you do not have to have every answer to breathe deep and keep going. So I think that's a great poem for us to keep our ego in check, make sure that inner critic is keeping its mouth shut. And now I'd like to end this presentation with a quick plug on the book, The 4 Agreements. So if you haven't read this book yet, I'm going to explain a little bit about it, but I do recommend, it's a short read. It's not a very long book at all. And in this book, the author reveals sort of the source of our self-limiting beliefs, these things that rob us of joy and kind of create that needless suffering, which we've already sort of attributed to our own ego and inner critic. So this is based on the ancient Toltec wisdom. It is a powerful code of conduct, and there's four things to remember. There's 4 things to do, and it's surprisingly simple. First, let's just talk about the Toltec real quick. Who are they? So these guys are considered to be the intellectual and cultural predecessors of the Aztecs a few thousand years ago, known through southern Mexico as women and men of knowledge. So they're not actually like an ethnicity or nationality. They are a group of scientists and artists, and they form the society to explore and conserve this spiritual knowledge. Now, while this book is not really religious, and the 4 Agreements is not a religion, and neither was the Toltec, it honors kind of all the spiritual masters, and it really just focuses on a better way to live life. And that's distinguished by the accessibility and abundance of love. So what are the 4 Agreements? Here we go. Okay, we'll get there in a minute. What are the 4 Agreements? First things first, we originally surrendered to agreements that were put before us. So these beliefs of how to be human, how to act, how to think, dress, how to be as women, how to be as men, how much emotion to show, all of this was kind of domesticated into us for thousands and thousands of years. This isn't just a 21st century thing that's happened. Okay, so this is forever. Children are born as babies. Babies are raised. They're raised to live what we are told is the right way to live as a human. Now, these agreements, though, have helped us get to where we are, right? Oh, good. We can dress ourselves and we can use the bathroom and brush our teeth. That's all great. But the thing is that we've also learned a lot of other things that were trained into us, usually with a system of punishment and reward. And so we just kept going on autopilot. And that's why we end up with all this self-judgment, because when we deviate from how we think we should be, when we deviate from how society says we should be, we get really sad and depressed, and we just feel empty, and we can't figure out why. So now, without further ado, let's talk about what the 4 Agreements are. They're really completely logical and simple. First, be impeccable with your word. What does this mean? Well, I'm just going to read just a tiny bit from the book. So it's so important that with this first agreement, we're able to kind of create our own heaven on earth. So it sounds simple, but it's very positive. So your word is the power that you have to create. Your word is the gift that comes from who we are. And so through your word, you express sort of creatively. You're able to create your own life. And regardless of the language you speak, the intention that you have while you're speaking it is actually what you create. It's what you become. And so to be impeccable with your word is really kind of controlling, again, that ego, controlling and managing who you really are versus who the world says you should be. And so definitely dig deeper into that agreement. Be impeccable with your word. How many times have you left a work meeting or a dinner with a friend or a conversation with a spouse or husband and kind of regretted something that you said? And why did you say it? Out of emotion, out of that defense mechanism, out of that ego, right? And so what's driving us? What's pushing us to say and do the things that we're doing? Is it you in there, your true self? Or is it that ego and that inner critic and that defense mechanism? And so think about this one day to day. Be impeccable with your word. Now, the next agreement is really kind of born of the first one too. So whatever happens around you, don't take it personally, okay? So using kind of the example, you're walking down the street and someone says, "Hey, you're so stupid," okay? And maybe you think to yourself, well, how does he know if I'm stupid or not? You're taking it personally because you agreed with whatever was said. But as soon as you agree, then that poison is going to go through you and you're going to be trapped in it. You're going to be trapped in that cycle of self-questioning and that personal importance and me. But the thing is you can't take anything personally that's going on around you. And this is often covered in the book Untethered Soul as well. You are on a rock flying through space with billions of other people. And if someone on the street calls you stupid, is that really important? Is that something to actually listen to and really mull over and kind of waste your time on? I think not. Don't take anything that's going on around you personally, okay? The next agreement is to don't make assumptions. Now, we have a tendency to make assumptions about everything. We literally infer and judge and try and problem solve every little thing that comes across our day. And we can swear that like the data we're putting together will actually make it real. But making assumptions about what other people are doing or thinking means we're going to end up taking stuff personally. And we might blame them for things that are going on in our head. And then, of course, we'll have that emotional poison with our word. So you can see how these all stack up on each other. When we make an assumption, we misunderstand, we take it personally, and we end up creating a whole big drama for nothing, okay? Don't make assumptions. It's okay to shrug things off. It's okay to not know. And it's even more okay to not care about not knowing, okay? Ask yourself what is essential. There's another book on the market called Essentialism. And if you go through your whole day thinking about, is this essential for me to know, talk about? Is this essential for me to do today? And you really ask yourself those questions, you'll find that you're going to weed out a lot of noise that just happens to be completely unessential. Now, the fourth agreement is to always do your best. Now, this one, I can tell like already the minds in the group are like, well, what does that mean? Is it my best or whose best is it? You know, under any circumstance, doing your best, no more, no less, is all you can offer. Keep in mind that your best is never going to be the same from one moment to the next. Maybe your best when you have the stomach flu is, sitting up for a minute and having a drink of water and laying back down. Maybe that's your best. Maybe your best when you're working a conference is to talk to 20 customers that day and then do the follow-up emails that night. Maybe that's your best that day. But it's going to change. And giving yourself that grace of determining what your best is in any given day, in any given moment, in any given situation is so important. Your best will be different when you're healthy as opposed to sick, sober as opposed to drunk. Your best will depend on whether you're feeling wonderful and happy or upset or angry. In your everyday moods, your best can change from one moment to the next. Okay, it doesn't even have to be like at a certain level for the whole day. But regardless, keep doing your best. No more, no less. If you try too hard to do more than your best, you'll spend more energy than is needed, and your best will never be enough. When you overdo it, you deplete your body, and you go against yourself, and it will take you longer to accomplish the goal. And if you do less than your best, you will drive yourself crazy with self-judgment and guilt and regret. So all you have to do, just do your best in any circumstance. It doesn't matter if you're sick or healthy, whatever your best is in that moment, just do it. And so these are the 4 agreements. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. If you can integrate these 4 things into your life, you'll be able to better control and manage your ego and that inner critic. You'll be able to put a pause on some of this negative chatter, and you will start to find a little more peace in every single day. And so to conclude this presentation, just a reminder, we're going to reflect and apply in a worksheet. There'll probably be a whiteboard for you to play around with as well. These were the books that I used to help build this topic. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I love this topic so much because once we crack this code, everything from here is gravy. It's just so much easier to have pleasantry and a simpler life every single day. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.